Welcome to the channel, guys. We are back again, and today I'm going to be talking about my top 5 recommendations for this summer for designer fragrance. So stay tuned for that, and if you like the content, guys, hit that like and subscribe button. I really do appreciate it. Now, this is actually a recommended list with some honorable mentions. I have a few honorable mentions. Not all of them I actually like that much, but I know that they're very popular. And actually the ones that are honorable mentions are ones I'm not a huge fan of. But a lot of people really like them. So I'm going to actually start out with those. And one of them is actually a very popular fragrance, which was just discontinued. And it is L'Homme Ideal Cologne. You know what? It's not a bad fragrance for, $25 or whatever you can get it right now. But to me, this was a very hyped up fragrance that when I first got it, I was a little bit disappointed. And frankly, if I'd paid more than $25, I would have been pretty upset because this one is just not for me. I mean, as a summer fragrance, it's kind of weird. It's creamy, a little bit sweet, and it just has this very strange vibe. I am going to be doing a full review on this one. But I know it's very popular. A lot of people really enjoy this one. So it is probably worth checking out. And for the price point of $25, it's not actually that bad. It has, as I mentioned, been discontinued. So if you do like it, it is probably a good time to buy it. It will probably go up in price a little bit. I don't know how much, but it probably will go up in price. So anyways, that is one of the honorable mentions from my list. The next one is actually a newer release that is also, you can find for, I think they actually raised the price to $35 or something like that. And it's not a bad fragrance, and that is Wild Mint. Now this one opens up a little bit similar to Crypto Mint to me in the sense that it does, for a brief moment, smell a little bit like chocolate and mint, but that is quite fleeting. It's actually more of a green minty fragrance. I don't really get a lot of the fruits that some people talk about from the Calypso. I get a little bit of sweetness, and I get sort of a dry woody base. It's okay. It doesn't perform that great, and it's definitely a weaker fragrance. So even though it does have a bit of chocolatiness in there, and it does have, that mintiness, it's definitely not heavy. So you can easily wear it in the spring and summer. But like I said, it's just not that great to me. It's an okay fragrance. It does have a bit of a toothpaste vibe, but altogether it is also one that a lot of people enjoy. So I thought I would, give that recommendation out as something to try because you might be one of the people who absolutely loves this fragrance. And it is fairly inexpensive, so I think for the price, it's not that bad. The next honorable mention, and the last one, I do actually like this one. The main reason I put it as an honorable mention is that it is discontinued, and that is Viktor and Rolf Spice Bomb Fresh. I do like this one. I know actually some people really don't like this one. I think it's, better than Night Vision as far as a fresher or spring summer fragrance for a Spice Bomb goes. This one actually has some of that Spice Bomb DNA in it, so I do get a lot of that spice, although it's much more toned down. And in fact, the Spice Bomb, the spiciness is in the background. What I get a lot of is a freshwater kind of aquatic accord, which is really nice in the opening. And I also get a saltiness, and the saltiness doesn't come from the water. I actually pick them up as definitely two different notes, so it's not like a salt water note. It's more like a freshwater note and salt. And underneath that is definitely this sort of spicy Spice Bomb DNA that, a lot of people love, me being one of them. So it is a fresher, easier fragrance of Spice Bomb. It is basically just Spice Bomb, but fresher. There's citrus on top. It's really nice. I wouldn't pay a crazy amount of money for it considering it's discontinued. But if you do like it, and I think it's worth trying out, it's probably a good thing to pick it up now while you still can. Those are my honorable mentions, and we are now into the actual list itself. And I'm going to start off at number 5 with one that you may be familiar with if you've seen my list before. And this is one of the reasons why it's number 5 is that I have mentioned it before, but it is still a great summer fragrance. I really enjoy this one, and it's Encre Noir Sport. This is also a very inexpensive fragrance. I think this was $25 or $35, which is relatively cheap. And it does perform fairly well. I get somewhere in between that 6 to 8 hour mark. And what I get from this, of course, it has that inky vibe. It has a nice darkness about it, although it's definitely not as dark or as heavy as the other Encre Noir fragrances. It has a very earthy kind of a vetiver in it, and I do sometimes get almost this kind of marshy smell in the sense that it's a bit aquatic, and it does have a grassy kind of a vibe to it, which I actually really like. And deeper in the dry down, this one does become a lot soapier on my skin, which I think is great in the summer. I mean, if you're out, well, if any of us can go out this summer, you know, it's hot, maybe you're playing sports, maybe you're on the beach or whatever, and you want to smell like sweat, having that soapy vibe in the dry down is really nice. So I do like this fragrance. I think it's probably one of the best cheap fragrances that you can buy, although there are actually some really great cheap fragrances. This is a really, really good one. And definitely check this one out if you get the chance. It's a summer fragrance that smells different from a lot of summer fragrances. That's one of the things I really like about it, is that it is different. Now, number 4 on this list is a fairly new fragrance. It's not that new, but it is Under the Lemon Trees by Maison Margiela. It is from the Replica line, and it's actually really, really well done. What's weird about this one is there is no lemons in this. But it does actually give you a very lemony vibe in the opening, and it does have a sort of fresh lemony vibe. And one of the things that actually ended up really attracting me to this fragrance, because I did like it at first, but I didn't love it. One of the things I like about it more is that there is a really nice tea note in the dry down. So it does go from this lemony vibe to a nice calming tea dry down. So it's very nice. It has a lot of depth to it. It does, you know, transition quite a bit, and, you know, not to say all designer fragrances are simple or straightforward, but it is always nice to have a designer fragrance that does have a little bit more complexity to it. So it is straightforward, but it does change a lot over the fragrance life, and I do really like that one. Now the next one on the list, also don't have a bottle of this one, but one that I really, really do like, and that is Acqua di Gio Profondo. Now, I do own Profumo, and that's probably the reason I have not bought Profondo, and why I probably won't buy Profondo anytime soon. Just because I feel like one Acqua di Gio is enough for me in terms of wearing. But Profondo is way better for the summer, in my opinion. It's a much fresher take. It has really lively, bright citruses. I find that Profumo is more incense heavy with some patchouli, and there's a very salty, kind of a sea salty vibe going on with it, which is nice because it gives me that sort of summer or that ocean breeze vibe. But this one is definitely different. So it has that, you know, original Acqua di Gio DNA quite strongly, but it's much brighter. It has more depth to it. It does actually project really well as well. So I got good projection on this one for, you know, about 2 hours, but it isn't the longest lasting fragrance. So, you know, it is a fresher fragrance. Profumo lasts a long time. This one doesn't really. So I do get around that 6-hour mark with this one. But I should wear it a little bit more, do a full review. I did first impressions on this one. I do really, really enjoy it. But I haven't picked up a bottle, like I said, because I do own Profumo, and at least for me, the Acqua di Gio line, I probably would only ever have one fragrance from it, because I do like it, but I'm not a collector in the sense that I want to get every one from the line. I like to have a little bit more practical, or at least I try to be a little bit more practical with fragrances. Doesn't always work out that way, and sometimes I end up with more bottles than I need, or most certainly do end up with more than I need. But Profondo, if you haven't checked it out, I would definitely recommend, you know, going to a Sephora or something that has, you know, where you can try it out. We are into number 2, and this one I actually did pick up. I think this one, to me, this one is considered a cheapie, not if you buy it retail, but if you get a tester or something online, I think it is a cheapie, and that is Bulgari Man Wood Neroli. And this one I got for $42 for a 50 ml, or is it 60 ml tester? And I think that's, yeah, it's a 60 ml. And I think, you know what, that is a very fair price. That's a really, really good price for this fragrance. And it is actually very nice. So it did the first time I smelled this one was in the airport. It did actually captivate me on that initial burst because it's very fresh. There's that bright neroli, and it is, there's something I find about some neroli fragrances, to me anyways, when it's a really quality neroli fragrance, I get this sort of prickly vibe, and I definitely get that prickly vibe, almost like the leaves or something are brushing up against your face, and I definitely get that with this fragrance, so I think it's really well done. A lot of people say it smells like Neroli Portofino, that kind of fragrance, but it does actually perform quite well as well. So that fresh sort of Neroli bright kind of vibe does last quite a while, and after that you get a nice woody undertone. As I said before when I talked about this fragrance, sometimes I do find the woody dry down a little bit generic. You know, I mean, especially for the price point, it's not going to be completely groundbreaking, and it is, you know, the style of fragrance that it is, it's not going to be a groundbreaking fragrance. They've been making these kind of fresh, bright Neroli fragrances for a very, very long time, but this one is well done. It does perform better than a lot of the Neroli fragrances, and it smells fresh, it smells clean, and it smells very nice. Has a nice, I would say, a little bit of a masculine edge to it, without being aggressively so. And so I do appreciate this one, and I think it's worth checking out. And if you do like it, would definitely recommend checking out online. I think I got this one on Fragrance X for $42, which I think is a good price, but you can check some of the other discounters and see if you can find maybe a better price or whatever the case may be. I'm sure you can find it. Now, we are up to the number one. I'm actually going to do another honorable mention just before I talk about number one. And the honorable mention is Chanel Allure Homme Sport, not the Eau Extreme. This is just the regular Allure Homme Sport, which is my favorite from the line personally. It just has this absolutely beautiful orange peel vibe that is really, really good. Like, I really, really like that vibe, and I really do have to get around to getting a bottle, but I guess the problem with Chanel is it's very difficult to find it for a good price. Chanel is rarely on discounters, and it can be very tricky to find for a cheaper price. And I also find the problem is a lot of people prefer the Eau Extreme. So Eau Extreme can be a little bit easier to find cheaper just because more people have it, more people might have a partial they're willing to sell, but the Allure Homme Sport is a little bit harder to find. But I vastly prefer it. I don't know, the Tonka or whatever in the Eau Extreme just doesn't work for me with the composition, but I love Allure Homme Sport. It's such a good fragrance. It's such a classic. It performs pretty well in that 6 to 8 hour mark. Very fresh, very uplifting. It's a very happy fragrance, I think. I don't know what it is about that sort of bitter vibe that really resonates with me, but I absolutely do love it. That is the last honorable mention, and the top of the list is perhaps one of my favorite designers of all time. The only one that I think could compete with it is actually Allure Homme Sport. And the reason I didn't actually put it on this list is because I feel like they're fairly similar in their composition. And if you've heard me talk about designers, this probably won't surprise you very much, but the top of the list, Terre de Hermes, Oat Refresh. This one isn't talked about this much or that much in the community. I'm not entirely sure why. I noticed it was on a couple of lists from a couple reviewers recently, but it's so fantastic and it performs really well. This one does last around 8 hours for me, and it has this really, really gorgeous orange bitter vibe. And this is kind of why I tied it with Allure Homme Sport, because it also has this sort of zesty, bitter orange peel vibe. And this has something very similar going for it with that orange, and I love that orange so much. And so it's very fresh. It does have a little bit of aquaticness in the opening, but this is not particularly an aquatic fragrance. It does have just a little bit of a wateriness sometimes, which is really nice. And it has this nice sort of vetiver, woody dry down. And like I said, I get sillage with this one for quite a long time. This definitely lasts around that 8 hour mark, and that's great for a summer fragrance. And this is one that also smells different. It smells different from other fragrances. So, you know, it's not the Bleu de Chanel that a lot of people wear, or the Dylan Blue, or whatever the other fragrances is that a lot of people wear. Although I have to admit, I rarely smell fragrance on other people. So I feel like, you know, it's always a very niche world, even in the designer thing. This is not something a lot of people wear all the time or whatever. But anyways, guys, that's my list. Those are my recommendations. I know definitely some of these I will be wearing quite a bit myself. So I hope you enjoyed that. Leave a comment down below what are you looking forward to wearing in the summer? What would you recommend for the summer? And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.